Hello. Today I'm going to show how to do a round robin in Ableton. And by round robin, I mean having a single source of MIDI, such as here with these four notes, but routing it sequentially, kind of rotating through a pool of voices. So for example, in this case, we have these four notes with a single MIDI channel, but it's being routed through voice 1, 2, and 3. Allow me to demonstrate. Look over here. So if you were paying attention to right here, you'll notice that we'll have one voice, two voice, three voice, and these are kind of rotating all the way through. So just to kind of bring the point home, just as a quick example, we can take this round robin example. And let's say I only want the first voice, just to kind of show what's actually going on here. This should record the first one and the third one. Although actually, since it's already kind of halfway through the sequence, it might be something different, but let's take a look. It should have two voices when we're done. There you go. So here's one voice, this is voice 1, this is voice 1, this would be written to voice 2, and voice 3, and so on. But the result is still just on one channel strip. So this can be very useful in a variety of situations. It can be useful as a building block for some other things in some other videos that I will put up shortly. Alternatively, if you have, for example, a monophonic synthesizer maybe, and you want to see what it would be like when played polyphonically, this could be a neat way to do that. For instance, you could have your synth patch, and you would simply have to duplicate it into 3 different voices like I have here. And that way you would be able to kind of play it with a single source of MIDI, but you wouldn't be limited by only having one voice and having it be overridden. So I'll go ahead and show how exactly I built this. So it's pretty simple. I only really have this expression control as the main source that is causing this. So in other words, the way this is working is we have this thing called the expression control device, which is a Max for Live device that I believe comes with Ableton starting with Live 11 standard. So in other words, you need standard or suite. I think it comes by default with those. I don't think even if you just have standard, I think it might have it, but don't take my word for it. I have suite, so I'm not exactly sure what standard has. With that said, at the very least, if you have Max for Live, even if you just buy it separately or something, maybe you can get this device, but it shouldn't be hard to find either. And what this device does is it just, well, it gives you a lot of different ways to kind of read in source MIDI information such as velocity or even MPE stuff like press and slide and all this other stuff. In this case, I'm not using any of these properties, and instead I'm using this increment expression control tab here. And what I've done is I've mapped the target to be this chain selector right here. And so if you look here at this little line here, you'll see that the dot representing the current state is kind of cycling through the line. So I'll play it again real quick. Like so. It's only playing the first voice, but... So it's going through, and the reason this works is because everything lines up in the sense that I have 3 steps, and I have 3 voices, and I've done this to be 0, 1, 2. So it's starts at 0, but it's still 0, 1, 2, so inclusive from both ends, and that gives you kind of 3 cycling values, like this specific combination of various numbers works. And it works in particular if you make sure to set this first one to 1, this one to 2, and this one to 3. That way it'll always land on the right one. And one last thing to note as well is this needs to be remote. So in other words, remote control and not just modulation. So it's not just adding, so to speak, to the selector here, but rather setting it to like an absolute value so that it's only ever one of these 3. And if you set it up to just look like this, then it'll do exactly what I'm showing in this video. And just to kind of give the full picture, each voice has, it's exactly the same thing. It's just a slightly different serum patch with the different format filters. But effectively, you just have to make a chain, make 3 different voices, make sure to, by default, they kind of start off like this. So just click on chain right here, and that way you can kind of drag these little thingies, and that way you can map exactly which instance the chain selector is selecting. Note that this can be very useful in other situations as well, but this is just how I've mapped it this time. And I've done it like so. and this way it cycles through. So honestly, that's about it for how to create this device. I hope this is useful for anybody who's trying to create a round robin situation in Ableton. And enjoy! So as a quick addendum to the previous section of this video, I will note that there is one other way to do this, using this ah.bear voice splitter Max for Live device. So this one I had to download. It's free. I think you just need to search it up on wherever you download Max for Live devices from. And it's pretty straightforward. I think even just by looking at it, you can effectively understand what it's doing. There's a neat tutorial with this, that comes with this device, but the gist of it is it gives you up to 12 voices effectively. I think the person who created it was solving a very similar problem to what I'm doing here. In fact, this is literally the use case that they had in mind. So you effectively just select kind of which voice in the sequence you want to be passed through to this particular device. And if you'll pay attention, you'll note that the X's are in different places. And this is what allows it to do every third to the correct device. So in other words, if we play it through, we'll notice that it does exactly the same thing as in the previous method. So it works the same way, and it's pretty easy to set up, arguably slightly simpler, although honestly I think it's a matter of preference. But what I will say is that I actually don't recommend doing it this way. And here's why. Let's open up an oscilloscope to understand a little bit better. I'm going to focus on this one right here so that our oscilloscope is looking at the same spot every time. And what I want you to pay attention to is where exactly the note lands. So I'll play. So it's slightly subtle, but they do not start at the same spot every single time. And it's not just that different voices consistently start at slightly different spots, because that would at least be something you can compensate for. Literally every single time a note is played, it starts at a slightly different spot. And, well, in my mind, that is completely unacceptable. This isn't a problem with this device. It seems to be a problem with Max for Live and how they deal with MIDI. I don't fully understand because I'm not actually an expert on Max for Live devices, but based on some research, it would seem that MIDI has some kind of jitter in this type of situation. It's not, well, I guess you could say it's not sample accurate, or basically it's not consistent, essentially. And that's a huge problem in my opinion, because I like things to be deterministic and I want them to behave the same way. Especially if I'm doing something very finicky like phase alignment or something, this would completely screw it all up. And it would be impossible to ever reproduce anything because it's completely random within like this whole area. It'll start somewhere in here. I think if you mess with your sample buffer size settings in Ableton settings, you can kind of make this a little bit less severe, but fundamentally the problem will not go away. So that is why I recommend the method at the beginning of this video. This device is very convenient, and I think it's really cool. I mean, it really is literally solving the same thing in a very easy way, but unfortunately, it just does not work as well.